Welcome all. I think we're going to give it maybe a minute or two for any stragglers to join. And you can indicate whether my audio is still okay since I had to log out and log back in. Still good. Excellent.
I can confirm that I hear you, Lars.
Thank you.
Hi. Let's all tell Lars we can hear him.
Yeah, we can do the equivalent of a mail bomb and just everybody reply to me that they can hear me fine, and then we'll fill the plenary that way. How's that? Right. While we're waiting to really get started, you can look at the slide that Alexa has helpfully forwarded for some tips on how to use Meet Echo, which is the system by which you are joining the session. So basically, you will be muted and your video will be off, and you need to unmute yourself and turn your video on when you get into the queue. Please do turn the video on if you can do it at all. I think it's nice to actually see each other in this virtual future. If you have a headset, you can use one. I do have one, but I prefer not to. That's why I asked whether the audio is okay. And there's some more details. If you get really bored during this plenary, you can click on that link or copy that link into your browser if it's doable and look at that. All right, I think it's a couple minutes past 3:30 my time, which is in Finland. So for me, this is a great time zone. My apologies and condolences to all of you for whom it's the middle of the night. I was in your shoes last time. It's not fun. So thanks for making it anyway, if you did make it anyway. If not, you're listening to the recording, I guess. Next slide, please. I should probably say my name is Lars Eggert. I'm the IETF chair since March of this year. We have a reasonably short agenda this time, which means we have lots of time for open mic, or we can have a really short plenary as you wish. We have the usual round of updates from the various bodies and roles. All of them have published or are in the process of publishing longer written reports that are mostly linked to from the IETF report that I shared earlier, so you can find them from there. I think there's also links in the various slide decks that are going to be shown. And then we have an open mic session, as always, in the order of IAB, IETF LLC board, and the IESG. Next slide, please. First off, I really want to thank Ericsson, who is the meeting host for this meeting. They were very excited to host us in Madrid, which was where we were all going to be, had COVID permitted us to do so. And they graciously kept their commitment up when we decided to move this meeting to a fully online meeting. So thank you very much for that. It's really, you and the other global hosts that make it possible for us to keep the organization running while we're in this virtual forum. And I really appreciate the support that Ericsson has given us again for this meeting. Next slide, please. And also thank you to all of you who's involved in making this happen. This sort of starts and stops with the Secretariat, but there's also other teams. Meet Echo is doing a great job running the system for us. The NOC is, as always, great in getting our infrastructure running for this meeting. The LLC signs the checks, the tools teams writes the tools, and they've been very busy. We have a little bit of an update on that later on. And the hackathon, I hear, has been going great, and the support team for that is doing a good job as always. So thanks to all of the people involved in making this meeting a success. Next slide, please. Right, my chair report. Next slide is very short this time. Basically, we're going through the usual statistics on participation, the plan for future meetings. I'm going to say some things about our currently running experiments, because as we put together the report, the written report, we realized there's quite a few of them, and maybe not everybody is aware what's going on. Already said there's more topics that we're covering online. I have some pointers to that. We have a slide about the tools.ietf.org transition, and we have a slide about the eModur activities. Next slide, please. Right, so as of 2nd of November, which is not quite today, I think, we had 1,037 registrations and 210 people used the fee waiver. 200 people participated in the hackathon, which is, as usual, a large number, in 17 projects, which, again, as usual, is a large number. The breakdown, also unsurprisingly, is pretty US heavy. Given that the time zones work, I would say okay-ish for the US this time, and also for Europe. Other regions of the world, unfortunately, are a little bit in a difficult situation, but that's why we rotate. And we're going to post detailed attendance stats, as always, after the meeting, especially since the plenary is happening before the meeting week. So we are probably going to pick up a few more late registrations as we move towards next week. Next slide. Right, future meetings, and also for this meetings, if you have any issues with the IETF or the meeting or anything, please use support@ietf.org as the one-stop email address for anything. You will get triaged to somebody who can help you. If you want to specifically talk about tools, there's a mailing list that you can join also to be kept abreast of what's happening on the tool side, which is toolsdiscussed@ietf.org. We are again going to send out a meeting after the IETF week ends, and would ask you to fill that out, especially since we're also going to ask for how this plenary experiment has been going for you. The experiment being that the plenary is not part of the meeting week. We moved it a week before, so we can open up some working group slots for the meeting. And then we have the SHMU working group in the Gen area, which is busy writing up guidance documents that informs the LLC and others involved in planning the meetings on some guidelines that the community wants to give them. SHMU is rechartering at the moment, so if you haven't paid attention, you might want to drop in next week. And there's a bunch of documents that are in progress or finished about what kind of guidance we're giving. And the list is the many couches list at ietf.org. Next slide, please. Right, so I said we have a bunch of experiments running. First and foremost, I mentioned the plenary experiment, which is the goal is to free up session time for working groups during the IETF week. As you recall, in this fully online format, we run shorter days than we do in an in-person meeting. We only have 6 hours of meeting time each day, and that really limits the amount of working groups that we can schedule. And since the plenary is scheduled across all parallel tracks, by moving the plenary outside the meeting weeks, we can free up, I think, 8 or 9 session slots, which I think was very helpful to get an agenda that has maybe fewer conflicts than normal, I would optimistically say. If you don't agree, put that in the survey. And also put anything else related to this plenary experiment in the survey that Jay's going to send out. I want to apologize to the people at NANOC. We dropped the ball on making sure that we wouldn't conflict with anything. I thought we had done it, but apparently we didn't, and we missed that NANOC is happening this week. Hopefully it's not going to be a terrible problem, but for those of you at NANOC, I'm very sorry that you had to get up early and then still do the whole full NANOC day after this is over. We also are doing an online welcome reception. I think this is the first time we're doing this in this virtual format, which happens right after this plenary ends. So look at the agenda and there are links. And I think the last slide of this presentation also has links. This happens in gather.town, which you may or may not have joined, which is this sort of virtual forum in which you can interact with groups of other participants. I think this will be pretty exciting. We're trying to sort of recreate the actual welcome reception that we have at in-person meetings. And one part of that has been the hot RFC session that Aaron Falk's been running for a while. And we're bringing hot RFC back for this meeting in a virtual form. It's also in gather.town, also after the plenary ends. So go and check out. There's some billboards, and people are going to talk about their proposals for IETF-related work. And I think that should be pretty interesting. I'm happy to see that we managed to bring that into a virtual forum. We're, for a number of meetings now, had running experiments with scheduling the BOF deadlines a little bit differently so that the IESG and IAB have the opportunity to give feedback to the people preparing BOFs in sort of with the end result, hoping that the BOFs will be better planned and better run. If you think this is going well, please let us know. If you think you would rather have the 1 week or 2 weeks back, and we should push it, go back to a single deadline and move it further back, let us know as well. At the moment, we are running an experiment in terms of eligibility for the IETF NOMCOM. This is defined in RFC 8989. The reason for this is that the original NOMCOM eligibility rules only extend eligibility to people who've participated in the last 3 out of 5 physical meetings. Since we're not having physical meetings, we decided to count participation in virtual meetings, such as this one, towards NOMCOM eligibility. And there's also different other tracks by which one can qualify for the NOMCOM, become eligible for the NOMCOM. One is being a chair, and the other one's being a document author of a recent document. We've run that experiment for one cycle already. So the current NOMCOM ran under that extended eligibility, and we published a result based on it. And the ISG has decided to extend the experiment for another year, which is one of the options in RFC 8989. The reason being, or one reason being, that it was quite unclear why some of the tracks weren't so successful in qualifying people when they were intended to be much more successful based on data we had when RFC 8989 was written. And rather than speculate, we decided to gather more data. The other more pragmatic reason is that we're still in an all-virtual forum, so at the very least, we have to keep counting virtual attendance or attendance to virtual meetings as NOMCOM eligibility qualifying, because otherwise we have trouble seating a NOMCOM next year. And finally, the ISG has decided to do an experiment of doing sort of a 360-degree reviews for ADs. And we just got the first set of results. Basically, we asked each other, we asked the IAB, we asked the Secretariat, we asked our chairs and document authors, as well as other document authors that we balloted on, to sort of give us feedback in sort of a set of short web forums. We got some interesting feedback from the community that we should revamp the questionnaire if we do this again, which we'll take into account. But I still think we got some, personally, I would say I got some interesting data out of this. So the idea is that every AD gets their own review, and it's not shared with the rest of the ISG. The entire ISG gets sort of an aggregated view, which averages all individual feedback. And that aggregate view we're planning on publishing, since we just got it. This might take a week or two, but you can then all see what the feedback was on the ISG as a whole. And that's about the currently running experiments. Next slide, please. Right, we had 0 appeals, which is great as usual, and we published one ISG statement, which is the aforementioned report on the RFC 8989 experiment. It has a bunch of data in it, so if you're wondering exactly why we are continuing it, please give that a read if you haven't already. And there are much more reports that I go into detail online on the data tracker materials page for this meeting. And as always, there's an IETF blog that Greg is filling with interesting content. So if you wonder what's going on, that's a good source to take a peek at as well. Next slide, please. Okay, about tools. So there was an announcement in May that the services that are currently running at the tools.ietf.org URL are being replaced, and we're going to wind that down. And it's probably going to happen before IETF113. The original goal was to do it before this IETF, but it was a bit more complex than was anticipated, and so we're moving that by a meeting. There's a few tools that are sort of still waiting to be replaced. Probably the XML to RFC page is the most visible of those. There is an authors.ietf.org beta that you can take a look at, which is intending to replace this. But we still need to do a little bit of work on the bibxml and the conversion service before that's fully there. There's a whole slew of other tools that were made available under tools.ietf.org. For almost all that have a sort of sizable community that uses them, we have a transition plan. There's a GitHub URL here that you can take a look at. But I also want to be clear that we can't maintain all tools that were under tools.ietf.org going forward, because we have limited resources, and some of the tools specifically were written oftentimes for a very small community. I think we have 1 or 2 tools that were specifically written for 1 participant. And I hope it's clear that we are not going to be able to maintain those going forward. But we're going to try our best. And if you have feedback on the plan, please go to that GitHub page and open issues or send email to tools discuss. Next slide, please. Right. There's a directory called eModder, which is the new home for the Edu team activities and also other mentoring and outreach activities, which has been chaired by Karen O'Donoghue, Greg Wood, and Joey Salazar. And Joey has just informed us earlier this week that she unfortunately needs to step down as a co-coordinator. So I really want to thank Joey for the contribution she's made to IMODER over the years. I also want to mention that we're probably looking for another co-chair of this. So if you're interested in helping education efforts in the IETF or about the IETF, if you're interested in the mentoring program that that's being run, if you're interested in helping with outreach into various other communities such as open source, please contact IMODER and get involved. There's a track wiki and there's a discussion list that is open for everybody to join. And we're really hoping to re-energize that team. During these virtual Corona times, it's been sort of limited what we were able to offer as services. But we're hoping that we can go back to hybrid meetings sometime next year. And that would also mean that we're going to ramp up these activities again. Next slide, please. Right, and with that, I'll hand it over to Mirja for the IAB.
Okay, so hello everybody from my side. I also will just give a few updates about the IAB as I usually do. So let's go to the next slide. Yeah, the full IAB report is already uploaded to the proceedings where you find all the admin stuff and all the information you might need. And as always, I can say now for the last couple of meetings, we will also have an IAB open meeting next week during the regular agenda, which will be on Thursday. So the IAB open meeting is really focusing on technical work the IAB is doing and giving the community a chance to give us feedback and to have some discussion with the IAB. So happy if you show up there and join us. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah, I just want to take this opportunity here in the admin plenary to do a couple of announcements. So one is about a workshop that the IAB is holding end of November. And this workshop is focusing on analyzing IETF data. So what we want to do here is to bring together the researchers and engineers that are working already on looking at, like, for example, participation trends, or author trends or author groups and these kind of things. Bringing everybody in the room, understanding what we know about the IETF already and what else we can learn from the data. I'm sure there will be some interesting insights about what happened during the last 2 years, what changed during the pandemic. So the workshop, the call for position papers is already over, so the workshop is kind of moving forward, but we're planning to, of course, record the sessions and putting them available after the workshop. And also a nice thing about this workshop is that we are planning for having discussion sessions on Monday and Thursday, and then actually have some time for hacking in between. So maybe we can actually come back with some nice results after the workshop and report back at the next IETF meeting afterwards. So yeah, looking forward to that. Next slide. Yes, also an important thing, we have the RFC Editor Future Development Program. So this is a little bit of special IAB program because it's actually driven by the community. And I have reported about this already last time, so maybe you know about this already. The important news this time is that they're basically done with the work. So the main document, which is describing the new RFC model, is currently in program last call. And if you haven't looked at the document yet, it's the right time to do so. So please reach out, read the document, provide feedback. The program last call is open until November 5th, but we will also try to reach out further in the community to get as many reviews as possible before we finally publish this document. And there's also a session from the program next week on Wednesday. So if you want to join the discussion there or provide feedback there, please join the session. Okay, and then another announcement is that Adrian Farrell is decided to step down as the independent submission editor. His term will end in February next year, and we probably have another chance to thank him at the next meeting in March and hopefully in person. But I already want to say very much thank you to Adrian. I think he has done a great job in this position by trying to make sure that, like, all voices are heard in our community and discussion is ongoing, and also I talked to him and he said he's kind of also working a lot with newcomers and providing advice to them. So in that sense, I think this is a really important position, and he has done a very good job and is very encouraged and cares a lot about this. So thanks a lot, Adrian. But he decided to step down and make some room for somebody new. So we're looking for candidates right now. As I said, I think this is a very important position in our community. And I think it can also be very interesting. Of course, there is a little bit of work here to do. But if you're interested, please let us know. I think Adrian is also available to talk to if you want to learn more about this, because he has all the first-hand information. I can probably only point you to the RFC where this role is defined if you reach out to me. But I believe Adrian is also available for questions. So please consider this position. Okay, and then we go to my last slide. This is also the point where I want to thank you, some of our community members who have taken up some roles. We just seated somebody new on the ICANN NomCom committee. We had 2 very qualified candidates, and Vittorio Bertola is taking the position. Thanks a lot for that. This position is actually quite some effort, so it's not easy to find people. So thanks a lot for that. There is a little bit of news about liaison management. So John Clanson has served for many, many years in the position of the liaison manager for ISO TC 46. He's already retired for a while, so he asked us a while ago actually to step down in this position, and we finally managed to find somebody. So a big thanks for John serving in this position so many years, for all his experience he brought in from like both organizations and all his knowledge he helped us with. And then also big thanks and welcome to Peter Koch serving in this position from now on. And then the final thing I want to mention here is that we are, again, as every year, are looking for a new person for the ISOC Board of Trustees. So far, Richard Bunce was serving in this position, and he reached his term limit after 6 years. So thanks a lot, Richard, for serving in this position. So we're looking for a new candidate. Again, this is the position that has a real time commitment, but it's also a very interesting position, I think. You learn a lot about what's happening in ISOC, and you can actually also impact there. And we as the IAB serve as the interface to ISOC, so we actually do get a lot of input about what ISOC is doing. I personally find it very interesting. I don't have all this knowledge about the politics behind, but it's always good to understand what's happening in policy and what other views are. So this is really definitely something where ISOC is important. We are really looking for you to put your name in. Last time we had a very good set of candidates. I think we had like 8 or 10 candidates, but diversity of that set of people was really, really low. So it was really just people from the US. It was only male people, and it was only white people. ISOC is discussing diversity a lot, and they try to fill their board with a diverse set of people because ISOC has like all the chapters very international as well. But I think we should also support them in trying to provide them a more diverse candidate than we had in the past, maybe. So I'm really looking for people to nominate themselves, or maybe think about people who would serve very well in this position and ping them, try to convince people to put their name in. I would definitely like to see more women applying, and I think we should also figure out how to get more people from other regions interested in participating in this work. So the call just opened yesterday. It will be open until January. Please put your name in, and please think about other people who could be qualified. Okay, that's it from my side. And I hand over to Colin, I think.
Yes, I think so. Is this working? Yes. Okay, next slide, please. So yeah, I'm Colin Perkins. This is the Ietf report, and if we can have the next slide, please. So one of the things we organize in the IETF in conjunction with the Internet Society is the Applied Networking Research Prize. Now, the goal of the ANRP is to award some of the best results in applied networking research to try and highlight some interesting new research ideas that are potentially of relevance to the Internet standards community, to the IETF and to the IRTF, and to try and highlight the work of upcoming people that are likely to have an impact on Internet standards and technologies in the future. Next slide, please. So we award multiple awards per year. We typically do 6 awards per year, and we're making 3 of these awards at the upcoming IETF meeting next week. And these will go to Thomas Vertgen for his work on extensibility of BGP implementations and routing protocols. And this is the ex-BGP paper. They'll go to Iasa Kashav for her work studying the effects of third-party service dependencies in the internet. And they'll go to Kevin Bock for his work looking at internet censorship. And these talks will be given during the IRTF Open meeting, which is happening on Tuesday in the 1600 UTC slot. The talks will also be on the IETF YouTube channel and on the webpage listed there. And there's also details of the talks and links to the papers on that webpage. I think we've got 3 really excellent talks here, so please do consider coming along to those talks, looking at that work. Next slide, please. That will be the last of the awards for 2021, but we have nominations open for the Applied Networking Research Prize 2022. So if you know of any good applied networking work, if you know of any people whose work that should be highlighted to the community, then please do consider making a nomination. And the website irtf.org/ANRP is the site where you can make the nominations, and it's got all of the details of how the prize works. So please do consider nominating, and please do consider self-nominations if you think your work is appropriate for the prize. And the deadline for nominations is in a couple of weeks on the 19th of November. Next slide, please. And that's essentially all I have to say this time. Look out for the IRTF talks coming up next week. The research groups highlighted in blue in the slide are going to be meeting next week. And if you're not familiar with the work of the IRTF and how we differ from the IETF, please look at RFC 7418. Thanks. Next slide, please. Okay, and with that, I will hand over to the RFC editor.
Thank you. Since we're in Madrid, buenos dias a todos. Next slide, please. Yeah, Myriad told you about the RFC editor evolution program, which is wrapping up. I'm holding the fort until we appoint whatever bodies and people will replace the former RFC editors. So I'm keeping the documents flowing. Next document, please. Next page, please. We have been publishing RFCs in XML for a year and a half. We published 461 of them. The process is working pretty well. I mean, there's some nits. The PDF page breaks still aren't beautiful, but the HTML and text versions are working pretty well. And again, since the process is the XML is canonical and the rendered versions are not, as we improve the rendering, we can fix it. It took a while for the production people to learn the ins and outs of XML, but they have done so. We are back to the service level agreement that we had before, and they're meeting the service level agreement. So although they're putting more work into it, they've staffed up so that RFCs are now being published as fast as they were before we switched to XML. Next, please. What I'm still trying to work on are the tools. I mean, a lot of drafts are still being submitted in version 2 XML, even though v3 is what we publish in, and v3 is in fact stable and usable. Some of the tools aren't complete. I have the discussions about, like, do we need an XML diff? Do we need other tools to make it to make SVG work better and things like that? We're also having a lot of discussions. I mean, a lot of people write stuff in Markdown. Do we want to support Markdown tools that have an entire Markdown tool chain? We're also doing some experiments in Auth 48. Anybody who's done an RFC knows that in Auth 48. There's a great deal of email back and forth between the authors and the editors, confirming the changes and approving stuff. There's clearly room for automation there. We've been doing some experiments in GitHub for people who like GitHub. And as I said, we also might want to advance and we might want to change and make Markdown an alternative input. But this is all stuff that we're still looking at. Next, please. When we went from V2 to V3, the V3 vocabulary was known to be sort of tentative. We expected some changes. The changes have all been pretty small. And with one change except for one change for postal addresses, everything is going to be backwards compatible. So if you use the vocabulary described in RFC 7991, that's valid, that will work. When we back out some of the postal changes, this is something I need to discuss with the community, but I would like to reissue the XML, changing the codes, not the text, but the codes, so that all of the canonical XML actually matches the final version of the vocabulary. And we also have a lot of issues with SVG. It turns out we backed the wrong horse. The profile of SVG we use is one that's nobody uses. It's abandonware, and the tools we have trouble producing SVG that matches our profile. And the question is, do we need to change the tools or change the profile or something? So we're talking about that. So the SVG subset will likely change too. But again, this is a minor evolution. Lots of people have produced RFCs with perfectly good SVG, both line diagrams and equations. Next, please. And I think that's it. Yep. So thank you.
Hello. So my name is Gabriel Montenegro. I'm NOMCOM chair. Next slide, please. So I have a very short presentation, only 3 slides, of which 2 really are content. The first and foremost is we need feedback. There was a recent call for community feedback that I sent out. This is a continuation of that. We need feedback. Here's a very, very easy way. Go to this link on the data tracker, nomcom/2021/feedback. You click on that, you'll see the names of all the nominees. You can click on all the names or the names you know better, provide feedback on them. There's also a quote-unquote topics at the very bottom of that page. Don't miss it. If you have feedback that is not specific to any given nominee, you can provide it there. But be mindful of the scope. This is feedback that is useful to the NOMCOM 2021. It's not general feedback. It's not a general discussion facility. Basically, this stems out from the fact that all of this is highly confidential. This will only be shared and seen within the NOMCOM. There's 17 members. You can see them on the NOMCOM page, who they are. So these are the only people who will see that feedback. So of course, again, don't think that the general or topics capability is a general discussion. For that, you can go to other venues like the IETF mailing list or wherever. So please help us reflect the community, give us feedback. I would be remiss if I didn't mention what RFC 8713 already calls out for. Please give us feedback on the incumbents. You have worked with them, you have seen them in their positions as ADs or LLC members or whatever the case may be. So please give us feedback on those incumbents that are standing again, and let us know how they're working, how they're doing, as well as all the other nominees. Next slide, please. Final thing I need to say is thank you to all the nominees. And I wish to also include the quote-unquote almost nominees, because I know there's folks who were considering, had discussions with some of you who were very, very convinced you were going to go forward with the process. For some reason, life happens, I understand. Not everybody who intended to made it finally as a nominee. But you considered it, and I thank you for that. And we have 30 nominees, and we have 32 nominations because 2 of those nominees are vying for 2 positions each. So huge thanks for all those nominees and almost nominees. And please if you don't get selected this time, please offer your service next time. We need many nominees for NomCom to do its job. Next slide, please. Here's some pointers. You can use these to get in touch with us. We have office hours this week. They're in the agenda. Please look for those. They're on Gather. There was one yesterday, one this morning, one tomorrow, one next week. If those don't work for you, please let us know. Send me email, send email to NomCom. We can arrange a meeting through WebEx, Zoom, whatever the case may be, phone. Just contact us, give us feedback. Thank you very much. That's it.
All right, and with that, we're going to the LLC, which is either Jay or Jason or both. I see Jay.
Yeah, it starts with me. Thank you. Next slide, please. And next slide again, please. So yes, thank you to Ericsson and to Gonzalo in particular for making this happen. As Lars said, Ericsson stuck with us twice now when we have cancelled in-person meetings and moved them fully online, and continue to sponsor us and also offer to sponsor when we go back to in-person meetings. So this has been very helpful of them. Thank you very much. Next slide, please. Thank you to Cisco, Juniper and the WebEx part of Cisco for their equipment and services sponsorships. We receive a lot of equipment from both Cisco and Juniper that really helps us with running the network for the in-person meetings. So we'll begin to start seeing that used again hopefully next year. Next slide, please. So thank you to the other 112 sponsors, specifically our Gold, Diversity and Inclusivity sponsors, Akamai and Cisco. Next slide, please. And to our Silver Diversity and Inclusivity sponsor, Huawei, and to our Bronze sponsors, Comcast and Donuts, and to our Running Code sponsor, CNNIC. As you'll see, our new set of sponsorships bring about a substantial amount of ongoing support from these companies, because I think we've managed to get the point where we're aligning with the values of these organizations well, and people are comfortable supporting us. Thank you. Next slide, please. So thank you to the many generous volunteers who make this happen. We had a code sprint last week focused on performance of the data tracker, and we had lots of people involved there looking hard at that stuff, so thank you very much for that. And thank you to the NOC who continue to provide us significant support, such as during this meeting, and thank you particularly to their employers who provide their time to us for free for them to work on IETF related things. That's very generous of them. Next slide, please. So I won't go through all here, but I've listed out everyone who's part of the team that hasn't been thanked so far. So we have the Secretariat team, we have the NOC contractors, Meet Echo, which is obviously crucial for us. We have the LLC staff, which has grown a little bit, and we have the contracting members of the tools team. So thank you very much for everyone for making this a success. Next slide, please. So IETF113, we are close to negotiating a new venue for this. All I can tell you so far is that it is going to be in Europe. We have had to move away from Bangkok due to the COVID situation there. We've been unable to find any other alternative venue in Asia due to largely restrictions on travel, and in some cases due to the state of the pandemic there. We've also similarly had to rule out North America due to travel restrictions, and we've therefore been working on Europe for some time. Now, of course, it's likely by March that many of the travel restrictions will have changed for those other regions, but that's not something we can take the risk on. We need to know now. And so we've been working in a number of countries in Europe, and we are close to being able to sign somewhere and give you good news about that. So that I think will hopefully be the first meeting that we're all able to have together. We're aiming for a smaller meeting than normal, probably capping out at around 650 people rather than what might be sort of an 1100 plus meeting, which we think is reasonable given the reluctance that some people will still have to travel and the practical difficulties that some people will still still struggle with. And then, but then we're going to ramp up again for the middle of the year and later in the year for the meetings to enable us to get back to normal sized meetings again relatively soon, we hope. Next slide, please. And so finally, thank you to all of our global hosts. So our global hosts make a commitment to us of generally 6 years, where they agree to fund us throughout those 6 years and to sponsor one, or to be the meeting host for at least one meeting or 2 meetings during that period of time. So these are people who made long-term commitments to us, and many of them have been making it for some years, having renewed at least once. So thank you to Cisco, Comcast, Ericsson, Huawei, Juniper, NBC Universal, and Nokia. Next slide, please. So this is all we have so far about the future meeting locations and venues. As you'll notice, we have a number of slots open, one in 2022 in November. We are close to negotiating somewhere for that. The Asia slot in 116, IETF 116, we're also close to negotiating someone there. The reason we haven't done those is that generally we need to do site visits and we need the hotels to be up and operational and functional for us to do business with them. And the hotels have really only started coming back on stream in the last few months. So that has been problematic until now. And for Mike's comment in the chat, no, the dates haven't changed. Those are still the same dates. We did look at changing the dates to see whether that helped availability, but there was no reason to do that. And so, no, we haven't changed that. And then looking further, you'll see that we've rebooked Vancouver later on, and IETF 119, of course, we had an Asian cancellation that we're looking to try to rebook as well. So this schedule should hopefully fill up quite soon. Thank you. Next slide, please. Registration numbers for IETF 112 as of the 2nd of November. We're doing quite well here, as you'll see. We're generally quite conservative about our estimates, and we are getting better and better about these. These are coming in quite close to our expected numbers. If you take the fee waivers off the budget, generally works out quite well for us. And particularly want to thank those people who we know who deliberately wait to register until there's a late fee so that they can pay us more to support us. Thank you very much for that. Next slide, please. So this is now the full complement of LLC staff. There's yours truly, the handsome man on the left, Greg Wood, Director of Communication Operations, Lee Berkeley-Shaw, who I'll be introducing shortly, who's our Director of Development, working on raising money for our endowment. Kasara Rathnayaki and Nick Giard are our 2 senior developers. They have slightly different job titles because where Nick lives, the word engineer is regulated, and so we couldn't use the word engineer for him. So, but otherwise they're the same roles. And this is it for our plan for some time for recruitment. We're not going to be adding another slide on anytime soon. Next slide, please. So I'm going to hand over now to Lee Berkeley to talk about the endowment and to introduce herself. Over to you, Lee Berkeley.
Thanks, Jay. Hello, everyone. My name is Lee Berkeley-Shaw, and I'm the new Director of Development at IETF LLC. I've been charged with overseeing fundraising activities with special emphasis on the endowment. I've been here a little over 4 months, and while I've met with some of you, I look forward to getting to know you all better and hopefully in person soon. I wanted to take a brief opportunity to mention the IETF endowment. For those who don't know, it was originally set up in 2012, and the IETF LLC assumed the legal and administrative home in 2018. The endowment is a designated investment fund created in support of the IETF and its activities, and it is intended to ensure the long-term sustainability of the IETF. This is really important as the sponsorships and registrations associated with the meetings essentially cover those costs of hosting them. And as such, IETF is currently being supported almost exclusively, not entirely, but almost, by the Internet Society. And as many of you know, our relationship with ISOC is strong, and we hope to have that support long into the future. But it's not prudent for any organization to be solely dependent on any single entity. The hope is that this endowment will allow a home for a variety of donors, and thanks to both a generous pledge of matching funds by the Internet Society and the interest accrued over time in the endowment, it will help diversify IETF financially and ultimately help us become financially independent. In my short time here, I've been meeting with the community to learn about what you see as priorities and how you see the future for the organization. My hope is that the endowment will allow us to make some of those goals a reality over time. As such, I'm very pleased to announce that we have a new gift to the IETF endowment as of September of this year. LACNIC, the Internet Registry for Latin America and the Caribbean, has made a $100,000 gift to the endowment. This is a first-time gift for them. We're so pleased. And they join Aaron and Ripe as key donors, and their gift will be matched 2-to-1 by the Internet Society. This is really exciting, and we hope this will be the first of many gifts coming down the pike. Our special thanks go to Oscar Robles and the entire board of LACNIC for their contribution. And I'd just like to say, if you want to learn more about the endowment as an individual or on behalf of your organization, I encourage you to reach out. I'll be in Gather throughout all next week, and I'm happy to catch up offline with you anytime you'd like. I think that about covers it. Jay, anything you want to add? Oh, wait, we can't hear you.
No, thank you very much. That's great. Thank you for that. So before I hand over to Jason, I'm just going to remind you that straight after the plenary session, we have the welcome reception. That's in Gather. We've deliberately made Gather space smaller, more cozy, so we're all pushed together and have to start interacting and talking. So come join the fun in Gather afterwards so that we can at least see each other in person, even if we're not able to meet in person at all. And now over to you, Jason. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Next slide, please. I don't know why my camera has gone blank, but these are the folks that serve on the board. No changes here. Let me try toggling my camera, sorry. There we go. No changes here, so all of the same board members as last meeting. Next slide, please. These are our upcoming board meetings. As is our practice, we publish our board meeting dates long in advance so that folks can join as they are able to do so and ask questions when you would like to during the open session. Next slide. So what's the current work that we're doing since the last meeting? A few things. First and foremost, I'll be speaking to this later on. We've completed the Iasa 2 3-year retrospective, and I'll have some more slides on that in a bit. We also completed a consultation on the LLC role requirements that we send to the NOMCOM. That was some feedback that we had received from the prior year's NOMCOM, and so we put that out to community comment over the past few months and then sent the updated requirements over to the NOMCOM in August. I don't think there were any major changes there, perhaps just minor tweaks. Item number 3, this is an interesting one that just came up 1 or 2 board meetings ago. You know, we've only just adopted an investment policy, but our advisor, Goldman Sachs, has recommended potential changes to those. And we'll be considering those. We've started to look at their recommendations, and we're going to, at the next board meeting in December, have an independent advisor kind of facilitate a discussion. And there are 2 things which are notable that they're recommending. One, they've recommended that we increase our allocation or exposure to equity investments to be perhaps a bit more aggressive from that standpoint. But number two have recommended that we consider adding private equity investments. And to date, we've focused really on low cost investments with the idea that, you know, we can't really beat the market, but we can control our cost of investing. And so if we can keep those costs low, you know, that's a way to, you know, eke out better returns. In this case, you know, private equity is certainly less liquid and higher cost from a fees standpoint, but potentially offers higher returns. We're not sure, you know, we're just learning about the recommendations and plan to dive into that a bit more. You know, I think, you know, no change is the most likely default position here, meaning we've, you know, just a year or so adopted the investment policy statement. But we're looking at it nonetheless because they are the advisors, and you know, we're willing to listen to whatever they recommend and consider it. So stay tuned for that, and we'll see what happens. And then, of course, item number 4, lots of work with Jay as the executive director, you know, the secretariat, ISG, IABI, Irtf, and so on. NOC team, you know, the different technical vendors to see what we need to do to get ready for our first hybrid meeting in March. Again, nice to have a bit more time than when the pandemic first struck to have that transition to online only. So, you know, some work is going in there, mostly around, you know, the contracting and support for any technical investments that might be needed. Next slide, please. So this is the view of the current operating budget. Really, the notable thing here is that the current net income is solely a result of the ISOC funding, the timing of that. And so that investment comes in December, I believe. So, you know, the numbers look better. What we'll plan to do next year is to account for that a bit differently in the budget so that it doesn't show up oddly. As we explained earlier in this fiscal year, the way that got accounted for was a bit unexpected, and we had to sort through that issue with our accountants. And so we'll present that in an easier to understand way for next fiscal year, which means that, you know, this timing of that one large investment will be, you know, more apparent in the budget and won't show these distortions up until the moment of that investment. Next slide. So these are all the ways you can get in contact with us. No changes there. Next slide. All right, so let's do a very quick review of the Iasa 2 retrospective. Next slide. So a 3-year retrospective was required by BCP 101. So that was RFC 8711 that was adopted as part of the Iasa 2 you know, sort of list of documents. In April, we proposed a high-level process for this and a timeline, and you know, asked for feedback. Starting then in June, we began the consultation process by first releasing a draft document for comment, asking a bunch of very specific questions as well as general ones. And then in the June to September timeframe, we made a number of revisions to that assessment based on community input. And then we've just released the final report. And so you can take a read through that, lots of details in there. We'll touch on some of them here. Next slide. So the feedback mechanisms that we included were a number of these. This is to some extent reflective of the fact that, you know, mailing lists alone are not sufficient for getting feedback in the community. So we did a mailing list, so admin discuss. We had all the documents posted on GitHub so people could do pull requests or open issues. We held 2 live webinars for Q&A, and then we held IETF 111 meeting office hours. Of course, we also, you know, opened up regular board meetings for comments as well. Next slide. So we had 63 specific enumerated requirements. 61 of those were rated as achieved or on track. 2 we were noting here as partly achieved or in progress. And those specifically were requirements number 50 and 61. So improve the IETF's technical environment and develop a sustainable funding model. Next slide, please. So on that first requirement, 50, improve the technical environment, I think the conclusion there is that much technical debt remains. I think we're all aware of that in the community, and we can all see, as Lars mentioned, a number of the transitions that are happening and focuses on, improving performance and, up resourcing the development folks that have been brought on and so on. And, in essence, the LLC has provided the executive director with whatever financial resources are necessary to fill out the team working on that, and provided whatever resources the folks in the community that are working on that might need. And so, we expect more to come, but, I think looking at it at a very high level, it's clear that not only is there a lot of technical debt, but the community is really in the midst of a transition to, maybe newer and updated, tool sets or technical workflow processes. And so we're here to support that and resource it however we can. But, certainly there's, maybe a higher rate of change, over the next few years than perhaps the past 5. So ongoing, in process. Next slide, please. So requirement 61 is developing a sustainable funding model. We feel like there's been a lot of progress here, but clearly, this is an area of continued focus. So first and foremost, we were, pleased to have the new funding agreement last year with ISOC, with the great matching program that Lee Berkeley mentioned a moment ago. And of course, thanks again to LACNIC for their new contribution. We really, really appreciate that and the leadership they've shown. We've revised the sponsorship program. So for example, we have different types of sponsorships that organizations can make, so new opportunities for that. We revised the endowment policy, created a sustainable fee plan for the online-only meetings, including fee waivers. We hired, obviously, that Director of Development, Lee Berkeley Shaw, and we've been working with the community to define what the COVID, impacted hybrid meetings may look like, including what a sustainable fee plan may look like, and a newer way to contract venues for more flexible sizing, if you will. And so that's still in process. We're, as Jay mentioned, very close to hopefully a first announcement for that March meeting. And it's clear that, going forward, there needs to be a little bit more flexibility in the sizing of, those venues and how those contracts work. And so, the team's been adapting to that. And clearly, we've only just kicked off, that agreement framework with ISOC, and that, Lee Berkeley has just been hired. So, we didn't feel like we could mark that as complete by any means. We think that we're making substantial progress, but we've got more work to do, and this is where there's a lot of board focus. Next slide, please. In terms of recommendations for future work, we included this at the end of the retrospective. First and foremost, we recommend that a periodic assessment be repeated, essentially every 3 years, just like this assessment was. The idea here being to sort of move away, if we draw an analogy to software development, move away from waterfall development to a more agile development model. And to draw it back to Iasa, instead of doing a review like every 10 years and then having, a huge amount of change that can be very disruptive and take away a lot of the focus of the organization, having smaller amounts of change. And so sort of driving that as a periodic assessment every 3 years, hopefully can be used as a mechanism to make more incremental change and not push things off, and doing it once a decade in a much more disruptive fashion. So we recommend doing that every 3 years, and that's something that the LLC will be scheduling and driving. 2, we recommended making a couple of modest financial planning adjustments. 1, during the annual budgeting process, just updating the target for reserve funds, and annually reviewing the investment policy, which we'll be doing again, late this year, as I mentioned, with the Goldman Sachs sort of prompted review of that. And then 3, it seems appropriate that the IETF Trust should initiate and lead a consultation on their legal structure. Just to provide a little bit more background on that, of course, the document explains it more, but the IETF trust structure is very unique, and the directors of the trust end up being essentially personally liable for things related to the trust, and so you can insure against that, and that's what traditionally we've done for the trusts in terms of providing them funding for those policies, but it's not possible anymore in the way that the insurance for those issues work to increase that policy coverage. And so that really is one of those issues that's potentially driving a change. And we've really just identified that this is a potential issue. I think the trust totally agrees, and they're going to go off and work on a consultation about what that might look like, and lead that discussion with the community. Next slide. So I think that's all for us. And next up is the Internet Architecture Board. Thank you.
Yes, so that's me again. I believe we have a next slide where we have photos of everybody, right? So not everybody has to turn on their camera at the same time. You can see all the faces and names here. That's the IAB. Lars, you can stay here if you want. You don't have to disappear. It's fine. Yeah, we have the IAB, we have Lars here, and we also have Colin and John with us for any questions. So now I should look at the queue and see if there's anybody who wants to ask a question. Doesn't look like it. I'm waiting a few more seconds. But the good news is you also, and there we have somebody, great, Andrew. I believe you should be able to turn on your audio and eventually camera on your own, Andrew.
Hi, has that worked?
That does work.
Marvellous. I've got a question about RFC 8890, which the IAB published, as you'll know, some while ago. And I wondered whether you had any thoughts on what to do to actually implement some of the recommendations or some best practice that was described in RFC 8890, and how we might get the voice of the end user more directly into the activities of the IETF. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for your question. You were breaking up a little bit, but I think you were talking about RFC that says that the user intent should be considered when designing protocols, and the question was if the IB did something to implement this. I'm inviting other IB members to add an opinion here, and like even the authors of the draft who are not on the IB anymore. But like from my point of view, this is the advice given by the IAB for the IETF community. I think it did trigger some discussion in the IETF community, but to actually take action or implement something and consider this in protocol design, that's something that needs to be done in the IETF community itself and in the protocol development process. And I hand over to Tommy.
All right. Yeah, just to comment a little bit more. Yeah, Miria is right that this is mainly advice to the community. However, in the ways in which the IAB does get to give input, such as when we're doing reviews of BOFs and charters, we've noted specifically that this document is one that we want to kind of have on hand and that we will look at and review during these times to make sure that it's something that's in our mind, and that if we see something that we can comment about, we will. So that's what we're doing.
Colin, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd also like to sort of note that the IAB workshop we're organising in November, December, looking at analysing the IETF data, will hopefully give us some idea to what extent the people developing the standards are representative of the broader community. So we can at least understand whether we are at all representative of the end users.
Good point. So let's move on with the queue. We have Aaron in the queue.
I see only one BOF on the agenda and maybe a half dozen side meetings. I'm wondering, is the IAB concerned about the arrival of new work to the IETF? And do you have any thoughts on, how to keep the intake moving along?
So I see Lars already there, because I think maybe concerned is also not the right word, but the IESG is talking a lot about this. So Lars.
Yeah, thanks. So this is of concern, right? And it was a joint topic. We recently had a little workshop with the IAB and the LLC board where this was one of the sessions, right? We are monitoring sort of the sort of activity of the IETF, and we reported on it, I think at the last meeting, a little bit more detail. We do see that sort of currently chartered work is sort of progressing okay, I want to say. There is I think I remember like a 10% reduction if you look at emails being sent, for example, but it's not sort of what I would call dramatic. But we do see a distinct drop in the submission of 0.0 drafts, and I think that translates into a reduction in BOF proposals. I think everybody is sort of finding it difficult to socialize a topic, especially something that's maybe a bit controversial or requires some more shaping in this virtual format. And we know also sort of anecdotally from a few people that basically are waiting with their proposals until they get to be back in person and can present to a room rather than online. So yes, we are sort of hoping that we can go back to at least a hybrid format, and we're going to hope that that'll sort of maybe revitalize the intake of new work. But yeah, I think the ISG and leadership overall will sort of see that concern that you raised down.
Is there any way that you can add some transparency to? So your observation that you think that there are topics that might be considered too controversial to socialize now was something that I hadn't heard. And I'm wondering, is there a way to sort of share some visibility if those things are out there? I mean, maybe that's not an accurate assessment. Maybe it is, but still, I think that from an organizational point of view, it would be reassuring to know this is a temporary, pandemic-related change, as opposed to that the IETF's utility may be diminishing.
So I agree. So all signs that we see point to this being solely based on the pandemic and not being able to meet. And so one thing that I'm actually happy about is Hot RFC. So thank you again for that, because I think that is actually a pretty useful vessel in which people can bring sort of at least sort of the nugget of an idea for new work and expose it and get some private feedback. And maybe that private feedback can be, you should really bring this as a BOF, right? Which we haven't had that for a while, and so I think people might have been hesitant to jump straight to the BOF stage, which oftentimes is a little bit difficult. We have site meetings also in this virtual format, but I think I don't have numbers, but it feels like there's fewer of those as well, because maybe also the site meeting crowd doesn't get what they want out of the virtual meetings, which I can sort of understand. But I wish I had a better answer than sort of hoping to be back in person, but I think this is really sort of, especially sort of new work seems to be something where people really want to sit together and chat and brainstorm, which doesn't lend itself well to virtual formats.
So I don't want to belabor the point, but let me just make, I feel like we're conflating two slightly different topics. One is I'm suggesting that when you say something like all signs are pointing to the fact that this is temporary, I'm suggesting that it would be helpful if those signs could be collected together and shared with the community so that we can all develop that assessment. That what the actual signs are that then the specifics, I think, are, they are what they are. But I'm just saying that, you or maybe the ISG are in a position where you're seeing sort of more potential stuff than the rest of the community. And I think if there's a way that you could share that, that would be helpful.
So maybe let me say one thing. I think, and this is a topic we've been discussing very often before and during the pandemic, I think we do have generally a problem to onboard new work in a good way, to find the right contact person and to bring people to the right stage, right? So it's not like I think the IHG is actually exposed to much more of these ideas of new work. What we're also seeing is that, and we're all seeing that there are components of an in-person meeting that we can't replicate in a virtual environment, and these are simply missing. And a lot of this was where you actually talk to people about new work and so on, and we can't replicate this, and we don't have it, right? And I think what the signs that we are looking at is just the numbers that everybody can look up from the data tracker or the email list. Like we see less emails, we see less 0-0 drafts and these kind of things. So that's very good hints, but it's also not a full evidence what's happening there.
Yeah, I get it. Okay, thank you.
Thanks,
Spencer's in the queue.
Sorry, I also want to
go ahead,
quickly
Lars.
say, if you feel like you want an answer from the ISG, maybe bring it up again during the later plenary when the ISG is on stage, because this is probably more a topic, well, as much a topic for the ISG than for the IAB.
I definitely agree. I think like a lot of people contact ADs first, so they might be exposed differently than, and the IAB is just trying to help later, and we're trying to improve that process. So now we go to Spencer.
Yeah, thank you. I may be talking to the. Okay, so two questions. The comment about work being considered to be controversial. Were you actually saying that was the people proposing the work were concerned that it was too controversial, or someone else was concerned that it was too controversial? I didn't understand the response to your end.
Yeah, sorry, maybe I sort of spoke a little bit sloppily here. Controversial might be the wrong word, but what I've heard from several people is that they feel that they need to have a discussion at a depth and at a level that they don't feel they can have in a virtual forum. So it might not. Okay. So it might be it's like maybe complex would be a better word than controversial.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's helpful, and I'll follow up during the IESG open mic. So with any other clever thoughts that I had. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Spencer. Then we're moving on to Sanji.
Had a quick question. I've got quite confused with the work on the SHMU group and the hybrid and all. So is Vancouver planned to be hybrid as of now? I mean, I realize things could change. Since we are mentioning Vancouver, I assume there will be some in-person meetings there.
I think you have to join the queue at the next open mic again. That's a question for the LAC. Sorry, but you can probably take this question, or we can take this question at the very beginning of the open mic session. Yari, you're in the queue, but you're on the IAB, so I'm not sure if you want to ask a question or
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, I wanted to return to the previous discussion just a little bit, and so the initial question was, are we concerned about the bots? And I think we are, but I think there are, or at least in my opinion, there are two factors here. One is the pandemic, which sort of easy to understand, but I think there's a longer term issue that it's not easy to bring new work to the IETF, and we've been discussing this, of course, many times, but we make it relatively hard, and some of the things that are making it easier is what RFC Lars already mentioned that, but also the hackathon. Like if you compare the experience of bringing a new thing to the hackathon versus bringing a new thing to the IETF, it's quite different. Like you go to the hackathon, yeah, you're welcome, and have your team, have your table, and you just move forward. It's much harder in the IETF side, and of course I understand some of the reasons why, and I understand that many proposals are also all over the place and not very easy to adopt to any standards organization. But I think we should at least recognize that this is an issue. It's difficult in the IETF to do these new things.
Yeah, just want to add, you say we're making it hard. I don't think we're making it hard on purpose. It is hard to bring new work. You have to understand a lot about the IETF, and we're not doing enough to helping people with that. And that's definitely a job for the IAB. And that's
what
what we do discuss at the IAB, but it's also not easy to find the right ways for that. So if people have more input, please let us know and start a discussion with the IAB. Okay, the queue is empty now, and as we already had the first question for the LSC, I just hand it over to Jason.
Thanks. And Jay, maybe do you want to speak initially to the Vancouver question?
Yeah. So just double checking when Vancouver is, but it's a little while off. Vancouver is 2024. So yes, I imagine that will probably still be some form of hybrid meeting, but I can't really guess any more beyond that, being almost 3 years away. If you have a more specific question, I'll try and answer it, but that's best I can do, I think, at the moment.
My apologies, I misremembered the slide. Will the next IETF, which is placed to be in a city, will it be in person since the hotel and all has been booked?
So the next planned IETF meeting, IETF113, is we are looking to book. We're currently in negotiations with a venue in Europe and hoping to book, and that's the one that, as I mentioned earlier, we are expecting or planning for a smaller number of on-site participants, about 650, down from what would be otherwise about 1,100. And so, yes, that would inevitably be a hybrid meeting. I think it's fair to guess that we will have hybrid meetings for the next couple of years at least, given the ongoing nature of pandemics and the way that diseases work. Over to you, Jason.
Yeah, other questions? Looks like Dominique.
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to follow up on the community survey. I think that was mentioned. And I note that it's both the LLC and the ESG, I think both that are covering it. I just wanted to see if you had any more follow-up on it in terms of actions from it. I know that you have a whole year that you're going to review it, but any information would be great. Thanks.
Do you want me to pick this up, Jason?
Yes, please. I'm going to quick rejoin. I'm getting an echo. It's hard to hear.
Sure. Just the other week, we had a joint IESG LLC IAB workshop spread over 4 days, and one of those sessions focused on the community survey and the outputs of the community survey and the major issues as reported through that survey. I won't go into the details of what was discussed because that hasn't yet been written up and agreed properly yet. But it certainly was, there was an understanding that some things there are important that need to be tackled by all of us, and considerable effort was put into thinking about how we might tackle those. So I think that's probably all we can say unless Lars wants to add anything to that. I can assume no then, so. Should we go with Spencer then?
Spencer, I think you're next in the queue.
Yeah, I just wanted to take a moment to thank you all on camera and live for the work that you all are doing. I've been following at a distance, the work that you all have been doing in the current environment, and this is the I think this is the IETF meeting where I finally realized there's no possible way I could even contribute to this. So thank you for the work you're doing. I know it is not easy, and I know it really matters.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see anyone else in queue. So I think we can move on. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. And that brings us to the ISG open mic session. And while we're waiting, if we get questions and somebody on the ISG wants to speak to that question, just start your camera and I will see that. Spencer, go ahead.
On the IAB open mic session about new work and things like that. I think one of the things that's important to say is that we have we have tools now that so I'm not talking to you guys. I'm talking to you guys and the community. We have tools that now that we could use more. So the hot RFC thing was kind of shut down during the pandemic, and it took us a while to figure out that we could actually do that in a virtual meeting or in a hybrid meeting. But that, and we've had the publication of public side meetings in the wiki for a while as well. One of the things that I note is that Gather is, and I didn't realize this for a while, but Gather is up between IETF meetings. So anything that you could do in Gather today or in the coming week, you could do in February also. And that does actually have the ability to have audio-visual conversations and things like that. That I think would be very helpful for people. One of the things we've done with side meetings so far, which is fine, is leaving people to find their own conferencing facilities. But if Gather is capable of supporting the small meetings that we kind of visualize as side meetings, that may be a good thing as well. I think it's important for everyone, especially the community, to remember that BOFs have never been a required part of this. They were just a convenient way of us evaluating new work proposals when the community gathered, when much of the community gathered 3 times a year. But there's nothing magic about BOFs. The thing is basically to focus on quality new work proposals coming in and being able to move those forward in the IETF. I'm curious if you all have reactions to that, but I'll hang up and take my take my answers on the air.
Thanks, Spencer. Go ahead, Robert.
Yes, but I wanted to say, I think the idea of having a high quality idea, not going through a formal BOF to directly kind of chartering, is a very viable kind of path. That is one of the outcomes that's sometimes recommended at a SEC dispatch, that the idea seems baked enough, there's enough kind of discussion on it. Let's do a little more mailing list discussion to get charter language firmed up.
Yeah, thanks, Roman. So one thing I want to pick up that Spencer said is sort of, I'd be curious to know if one reason why people find it difficult to progress work is the lack of sort of tools like Gather. So given that sort of Hangouts and other sort of free collaboration systems are available. If that's the case, we can certainly try and invest there from the tools side. If this is really sort of an issue for many people. If so, maybe send email to ISG or get into the queue now. I think I still have Spencer in the queue. I want to go to him first, and then I see Wes.
That was me actually leaving the queue and then popping back in front of Wes. My apologies, Wes. So I wanted to really thank you for the comment about sec dispatch. As a reminder to me, almost all the areas have some form of dispatchy function these days, don't they? And I wonder whether being able to do something with those kinds of groups where where it's more formal than a side meeting together, but less formal than a BOF request, being able to do that on an ongoing, like once between IETF meetings, say, as an example, just so that people aren't waiting 4 months to have, see how things go at the IETF. The thing that Jason was talking about with the LLC of, looking at stuff more frequently than we have been looking at things. I think that may be a good model for the technical work as well. To say what are we gonna wish we had a good proposal, had approved a proposal for at the next IETF meeting. And like I say, you guys would know better how to do that on the with the current structure and in the current environment. But I did want to respond to that as well. I think you're digging in the right hole. Thank you.
Gordon, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. So, I think one of the things that things like BOFs give us that dispatch type groups don't is it seems as though we get more cross-area input from BOFs and similar. And one of the things I'm concerned about is that we don't end up in sort of silos of people in areas. One way we could try and mitigate that is try and make it so that people are more willing from other areas to show up at the dispatch meetings. Possibly by scheduling things so that there's less conflict so that with dispatches, or just trying to sort of have more of a culture of dispatch meetings are more open and accessible to people from other areas. I'm really concerned we end up with silos of apps working on apps, ops working on ops, routing only on routing, and we don't get the wide cross area review.
Yeah, one quick point to that is we actually sort of discussed briefly yesterday, actually, and also a few weeks ago, the idea of whether we should have like a dispatch or just dispatch meeting, where basically it's something I called RFC, but with discussion and IETF wide, where you can basically have a first stop for new work and where it gets triaged maybe into areas or maybe just in some other directions, and that by its nature would then be cross area. So that could be sort of a thing to try out. But I want to go to Wes, who's been patiently waiting in the queue. Wes, go ahead.
So first off, apparently Warren says we should be wearing hats, so I thought I'd join in. But I wanted to follow Spencer's topic a little bit because it's an important one, and it's definitely easier to have new work when you can get together and do it in person. But we're not going back to fully online or fully in person for a while. I mean, we just heard earlier that, we expect March to be sort of half attended. And so hybrid meetings, may still mean less incoming work unless we can, find other solutions that, allow us to continue bringing in new work, even when some of the potential participants can't actually make it to the meeting because they're in an area where travel may be restricted, for example. So it would really benefit everyone to concentrate on reaching out and helping, through some of the existing tools. And I'm very happy that Spencer, mentioned Gather, for example, as being around in between meetings. I will admit myself, I haven't joined Gather as much as I should, and I intend to make a concentrated effort to do that. But just, even responding to email or helping out with the guides program or something like that, would greatly help bring in new work. It feels really good when you actually manage to, help somebody take a document, walk them through the IETF process, and then later find, that new member that brought in new work to become a active member of the IETF community. And there's been a couple of cases over the past, I want to say 5 to 10 years where I've helped somebody come in, and now they're actually writing more mail than I can, because I really am not great at keeping up with email. But so final point is really try and make a concentrated effort to help help newcomers come in and help them, because it will just whittle away and wither if they don't get help through the weird process that's the IETF. I'd argue every standards organization has the same issue, not just the IETF. Thanks.
Thanks, Wes. Yeah, that was a good point. So I actually got matched up with somebody through mentoring that was trying to bring new work. I think it was to transport. And that was, I think, a pretty interesting engagement for both sides in terms of, you can really sort of help somebody explain, what should you focus on when you first present this, what are some of the questions you're likely going to get, and so on. And I'm wondering, so also thinking about eModer and the mentoring effort, whether this is something we can maybe strengthen, right? Whether we actually don't only focus on new participants, but focus on new work that might come from existing participants, but that it might be work that they don't quite know how to bring. Could also be something for further discussion. I see an empty queue at the moment. Does that mean we are ending almost on top of the hour? Aaron, go ahead.
Yeah. So before we break, the comment to everybody capabilities in Gather are a little bit limited, and so I want to take a minute and just sort of talk about the hot RFC structure, if that's okay with you.
Yes,
okay.
please.
So we have a space in Gather for hot RFC. The links on the agenda page. And Notewell is the password to get in. If you go in there, you'll see where you enter, and after you decorate your avatar, there's directions on the floor to take you to the hot RFC space. It's laid out like a poster session, and so each talk has a little, essentially a private room in Gather where folks who are in the room can talk to each other, but you don't hear people outside the room or hear the video. There's a YouTube video for each talk where you can asynchronously watch the talk if you haven't seen it already, and there's a whiteboard for leaving messages to other interested folks and or having real-time discussion. And I've invited each of the presenters to be present in their little poster room for folks who want to discuss their proposal. So we've got an hour, nominally starts at 1/4 the hour in about 12 minutes. You can wander around and talk to folks. This is co-scheduled with the reception, so you don't have to go there. You can go to the reception and talk to anybody you want. We do have the space for the entire day. And so if folks want to run long for any reason, that's totally fine. You're not going to get kicked out. And I will be there if anybody has any questions on how to interact. And the secretary is also around, and they're helping people as well. So I think that is everything I wanted to get out there. So hope you all show up and can make it, and yeah, enjoy it. And give me feedback if things that you liked or didn't like, so that we can figure out whether this is something we want to continue next time.
Thanks, Aaron. That was useful. And yeah, thank you all for joining the plenary. I know it was early for some of you, but I think we had pretty good attendance. Probably on the same order of magnitude as the last few that we've done, so that's a good sign for this experiment. And I'll see you all over in Gather now, and then next week in the working group sessions. Enjoy the IETF. Bye, guys.